So, can you surmise the primary logical errors of precept?
Well, I can't speak to other precepts, but this particular one I think can be boiled down to circular argumentation. A very specific type of deity drawn from very specific readings of the Bible to be interpreted in a very, very specific way. You start there and then you end there. So in the Bible, it says this, and I'm going to interpret that this way. And it says something like, if you didn't have God, you would be a fool. And it says that you can't know anything without God, sort of. So because it says these things, and I understand what they say, then it must be true. Otherwise, I couldn't make sense of anything else because it just said that I can't make sense of anything else without God, and there it is if I interpret it this way in the Bible. So there you go. It must be true. It is true, and I'm going to declare it's true, and I'm going to beat everyone on the head with it being true. And all I'm basically saying is the Bible is true because the Bible said it's true over and over and over again. That's all this really boils down to, is one giant circular argumentation.
Do you think this is one of the weaker or stronger arguments for the existence of God?
Boy, that's kind of like asking me if arsenic is more deadly than pufferfish poison, or if drinking mercury is a better idea than drinking bleach. uh, it's worse. It's the weakest argument because it's not really even an argument. It's circular, so there isn't really an argument, and we didn't see one presented here, and there is none offered. Just an endless "how do you know" repeated ad nauseum over and over again. And that's not a debate. That's not anything. That's just childish and rather pedestrian, if I may inject that. And I guess I would say that the lowest count of fallacies that I've ever come across is one. And actually, that led to two or three additional fallacies, but it was one primary fallacy that then, because of that, tacked on other fallacies. So if you were to remove that one fallacy, then in theory you could make the argument somehow work. And that's in St. Thomas Aquinas' the unmoved mover argument. There's one primary fallacy, and then because of that, other fallacies are added. So the main issue with that particular argument is it's in a deductive format when it should have been in a probabilistic format. So if someone went to the time and trouble to change it to a probabilistic format and then remove that primary fallacy, it's theoretically possible that they could make it work. Maybe. I suspect strongly would still have at least one logical fallacy, but definitely that's a stronger in terms of the mechanics of logic argument than this mess, which is 200 plus fallacies. So, yeah, definitely this one loses epically.
Why do you think so many people find this argument fascinating?
Well, I think that there's kind of two answers. The answer for the people that find it fascinating and use it is probably because it's so simple. Like I said, it's pedestrian. It's easy to remember. All you have to do is ask the other person, how do you know that, over and over again, until they admit that they can't know it, or they don't know it, or they're not sure, or they don't have 100% certainty, or whatever. And then you win because you declare, aha, I have certainty because I have God and you don't, so therefore I'm right and you're wrong. And even if you don't get them to that point, you might irritate them and piss them off. You might get them to just run away or ignore you or whatever. And so you've successfully trolled them, but you can feel a sense of victory because you won them. As far as people who are interested in it and study it, I think it's akin to studying the remains of a horrible, horrific train wreck. It's like, oh, this is horrible. All these people have died, but we've got to figure out what happened here. Let's examine this in detail, every little grisly part of this train, to find out what happened.
Toward the end of the debate, Matt did get Sye to admit that special pleading was a fallacy. Even if we take away the unproven assertions, because all religions are basically unproven assertions, why do you think precepts persist in using this apologetic when it's so full of obvious fallacies?
Well, I don't really think that they know that there's fallacies, or if they do know that they just don't care because they base this all on the assumption or the assertion that without God you can't use logic, that logic exists, therefore God exists. I've heard that argument as well put forward by precepts and others as well, and that one irritates me as well. But at any rate, that argument basically means that if you have a fallacy and your opponent points out that fallacy, you win the debate. Because you can't point out my logical fallacies without admitting that there's God. You can't use logic unless God exists. So the minute you say that there's a logical fallacy on my side, you've basically made it so I win. So heads I win, tails you lose, you know. Or if I was to say, hey, Karen S., let's debate. The topic's going to be Deconverted Man will lose this debate. If you win, I win the debate. If I win, I've proven that I'm going to lose the debate and I win anyways. So no matter what, I win. And there's other things that mirror this kind of paradox where, you know, you could say, I'm a liar. And if you're a known liar, then you must be lying, but then you would be telling the truth, which you can't do because you're a liar. Or, you know, the sentence below is true, the sentence above is false, things like that. And I think that precept basically tries to create a paradox and say, if God's real, logic is real, therefore God's real. The minute that you try to use logic, you've proven that God's real. So you can't. So even if we have fallacies, it really just doesn't matter. We can be as lazy as we want about our arguments, and if you reject anything, or if you say, "Oh, that's fallacious," we've won because that proved God exists. Because you use logic, and you can't use logic without God. So I think that if they are aware, they think that it's just going to prove their point more so, and if they aren't aware, or they just don't care, what are those things? But I do think that no matter what, they feel like they've won and that they'll always win because of this construct of a paradox that they've tried to form. Okay, so Karen, do you think that you've learned anything new about Sye from this debate?
Well, I've never seen him in a formal debate like this, but I think for the most part it was nothing new. This was his standard material. Sye used the same method of cherry picking video clips as he supposedly instructed Bible thumping wingnut to do in a debate he had with Alex Botten late last year. I also noticed he came up with a reply to the I am not omniscient answer to the precept question, name one thing you know for certain. He said that answer only corresponds to absolute reality. He never, as usual, demonstrates why that's true, however.
How do you think Matt did on this debate?
I think Matt did a good job overall, but he could have been a little more aggressive. For example, the time he seemed to concede that one of the reasons it's not reasonable to believe in a God is that there has been no evidence of the supernatural as an argument from ignorance, as asserted by Sye. He could have pressed the point that he is not presuming or concluding there is no supernatural, as when most apologists presume the world is so complex and awesome that therefore their God must exist.
Why do you focus on precept, Karen?
Well, I knew something about fallacies and I could see them all quite clearly in this apologetic. I also felt that it was like the ultimate sophistry, and as a word game it could be beat, and I decided to set out to find its weaknesses, which I did.
Do you agree with the final count of logical fallacies for this debate?
Of course, I should have because I took part in it, didn't I?
Okay, well, I will talk to you again soon, and we will have more to say about other stuff, I think. So, if you're listening on YouTube, then go to the next video. If you're not listening, then you don't have any idea what I just said. So, If you're not listening, send me $1,000,000. Yes. That will mean that everyone that's not listening will send me $1,000,000. Huh. But how will they know how to send me it? I should end this video. Hang out. Whatever this is. Good night!